Have you ever stood outside your own house, holding your life in a few cardboard boxes, while the people who raised you watched from the window like you were a stranger? That was me. 10 years ago, it was a quiet evening, the kind where you can almost hear your own thoughts echo. I had just come back from grabbing dinner with a few friends. Nothing special. Just a night like any other. But when I walked through the door of the house I grew up in, nothing felt the same. My books were in boxes, my clothes, my blankets, even the photos I'd tucked away in my drawers. And there she was, my sister Emily. Standing by the doorway, with that same smile she always wore whenever she got what she wanted. My parents sat stiffly on the couch like they were waiting for someone to make a speech at a funeral, except I was the one being buried. They said I had betrayed them. That I'd gone behind their back. That I'd sold them out to my Aunt Margaret. The truth? I asked Margaret to help me pay for college. That was it. Not because I wanted to hurt anyone, not because I wanted revenge. I just wanted a future, a chance, a way to get out from under the shadow of a family that only ever had eyes for my sister. But, in that moment, none of it mattered. They didn't want to listen. They didn't want to hear me out. They just wanted me gone. And just like that, I was. That night, I walked away from the only home I had ever known. No goodbyes, no explanations. Just me, a couple of boxes, and a heart that had learned, maybe for the first time, what it meant to be truly alone. But sometimes, the people who love you the loudest are the ones who don't raise their voices at all. Aunt Margaret opened her door without asking a single question. She wrapped me in the kind of hug that said, "You don't need to explain. You're safe now." And that was the moment I realized. Family isn't always who you're born to. Sometimes, it's who shows up when no one else does. I used to joke that my sister Emily could sneeze and our parents would throw her a parade, but me? I could win an award, solve a puzzle, get an A on a test, and all I'd hear was, "That's nice. Can you pass the salt?" I was the second child, the spare part, the quiet one. And Emily was the sun. 4 years older than me, she had this glow about her that everyone seemed to see, except it burned a little too hot if you got too close. When she got into a top-tier business school, Mom and Dad acted like they'd raised the next Steve Jobs. They paid for everything: tuition, a luxury condo, clothes that cost more than my entire wardrobe. They even helped her start her first company at 22. Me? I learned early on that if I wanted something, I'd better figure it out on my own. So when I got accepted to a prestigious university in the UK to study history, something I had dreamed of since I was a kid, I held on to a little hope. Just a little? That maybe, just maybe, they'd help me. I wasn't asking for much. I didn't want them to pay for everything. I just wanted them to co-sign a loan. That's it. Just a signature. But they looked me in the eye and said no. "We've already paid for Emily's education," my dad said. "We need to focus on our future now," my mom added. And just like that, the door quietly closed in front of me. I can still remember the silence that followed. Not anger, not shouting, just that sinking feeling. Like when you realize the people you've been trying to impress your whole life weren't even watching. So, I did what I never thought I'd do. I called my Aunt Margaret. Margaret is my dad's older sister. A brilliant neurosurgeon, a widow, and honestly, the kindest soul I've ever known. But in our family, she was like a ghost no one wanted. To admit was real. My dad could never quite stomach her success. Every time she showed up to a family event, dressed in quiet elegance and bringing thoughtful gifts, I'd see it. That look in his eyes. Jealousy, pure and simple. Still, I called her. My voice trembled when I asked if she could help. And her answer? Immediate. "Of course, honey. Why didn't you come to me sooner? I didn't know how to tell her I was afraid of what my father would do if he found out. Please, I begged her, don't tell them. Just let me figure this out quietly. She agreed, and for a while things were okay. My tuition was paid. I was getting ready to leave for school. I even let myself feel proud, like maybe I'd carved out a path that was mine alone. But of course, Emily couldn't let that happen. To this day, I don't know how she found out. Maybe she went through my computer, maybe she just sensed that I was finally standing on my own, and that was enough to set her off. Whatever it was, she dug through my emails, found messages between me and Aunt Margaret, and here's the kicker, edited them, photoshopped, fabricated, lied. She made it look like I had traded our family's private information in exchange for money, made me out to be some kind of traitor, a snake, someone who would sell out their own blood, and just like that, the house turned against me. I came home one night and everything I owned was already packed. My clothes, my laptop, my books, even my bed sheets. Emily stood there, arms crossed, smiling like she'd won some invisible war. My dad didn't even let me speak. He shoved a stack of printed emails into my hands and growled, "Explain this." I tried. I really did. But my voice didn't matter in that house. It never had. "We trusted you," my mom whispered like I had burned down the family name. It didn't matter that the emails were fake. It didn't matter that Aunt Margaret would never have asked for anything in return. They had Emily. They had their star, and I was just in the way. I remember the sound of the front door clicking shut behind me. I remember standing there on the porch, holding 2 boxes and a bag of clothes. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Mostly I just felt cold. Like the warmth of that house had never really been mine to begin with. It wasn't until I got to Aunt Margaret's that I finally let the tears come. She opened the door, saw my face, and didn't say a word. She just pulled me into a hug and whispered, "You're safe now. You're home." Margaret didn't ask a single question that night. She didn't need to. I think she already knew. She just took one look at me, hair a mess, eyes swollen, boxes stacked behind me, and said the 3 words I hadn't heard in so long they almost sounded foreign. "Come on in." I didn't know what to expect. Her house was quiet, warm, filled with little things that made it feel lived in. Photos on the mantel, the smell of cinnamon in the kitchen, a half-read novel beside a cozy chair. It didn't scream wealth or perfection. It whispered comfort. That first night, I lay awake in the guest room, in a bed that wasn't mine, staring at a ceiling I didn't recognize. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything. No grades to impress anyone, no noise to compete with. No Emily. Over the next few weeks, I slowly found my footing. I'd wake up to the sound of Margaret humming in the kitchen, the scent of brewed, coffee filling the air. She never asked me to explain what happened. Instead, she gave me what I never knew I needed: time, space, silence. And in those quiet mornings, over toast and tea, she began to tell me stories. Stories about my father, her little brother, back when they were young. How he always wanted to outshine her, even when they were kids. How he used to get angry when she won spelling bees or got praised at family dinners. How that rivalry never faded, just morphed into something more bitter when she became a doctor, and he didn't. She told me about how when she lost her husband young, she had to rebuild her life from scratch, with no one but herself to lean on, and how even then, my father barely called, barely cared. It was strange. For so long, I thought I was the broken one, the outsider, the odd piece in the puzzle of our family. But the more Margaret spoke, the clearer things became. I wasn't the problem. I was just inconvenient. I didn't fit into the perfect little image my parents had built around Emily. And when I started showing signs of independence, of carving my own path, even if it was through struggle, it threatened the fragile balance they'd built. Because if I succeeded, what did that say about their golden child? Margaret helped me see that. She didn't say it with anger. She wasn't trying to turn me against anyone, she was just honest. One evening, while we sat on the porch watching the sky turn pink and the crickets begin their nightly choir, she said something that still sticks with me. Blood makes you related, but love is a choice we make every day. And in that moment, I knew. I didn't need my parents' approval. I didn't need to be invited back, or forgiven, or even acknowledged. Because for the first time in my life, I felt wanted. Not for what I could achieve or what I represented, but for simply being me. Margaret helped me prepare for school. She made checklists, helped me find the right luggage, took me shopping for supplies, even ironed my dress shirts. She treated my departure for college like it was the proudest moment of her life. And when she hugged me goodbye at the airport, she said, "You go make your life, Michael, and don't look back unless it's to smile." I cried. Right there at the gate, not because I was sad, but because someone was proud of me. Truly proud. Not, "Oh, that's nice, now let's talk about your sister," proud. But deep, genuine, heart-swelling, kind of proud. For the first time, I boarded that plane not just as a student, but as someone who had finally been seen. The months that followed were some of the best in my life. London was beautiful. The classes were challenging. The people were different. But what mattered most was what I left behind. I left behind the version of me that begged for crumbs of affection. I left behind the silence. I left behind the fear. And in its place, I carried Margaret's voice, her steadiness, her love. I never expected to hear from them again. After that night, after they shoved me out with nothing but boxes and blame, I told myself I was done. I buried the pain, let the silence grow thick between us, and kept walking forward. But pain has a way of leaving its mark, like a scar that aches when the weather changes. Even in London, even as I found my footing, there were moments, quiet, heavy moments, when I'd check my phone wondering, would they ever call? Would they ever say sorry? They didn't. At least, not at first. The first message I got, nearly a year later, was from Emily. It was just one line, no greeting, no apology, just, "Hope you're doing okay. Also, don't leave your laptop lying around next time." I remember staring at the screen, my blood boiling. That was her version of closure, a smirk hidden in a sentence. I didn't reply. I just blocked her number and moved on. Fast forward a few years later, I graduated, got a great job, moved into a quiet little place that finally felt like mine. Then one afternoon, my phone rang. It was Mom. For a moment, I thought it had to be a mistake. My hands froze over the screen. My chest tightened. I hadn't heard her voice since the night she told me to leave. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity got the better of me. "Hello?" I said, careful to keep my voice flat. There was a pause. Then, "Michael, it's your mother." Like I wouldn't recognize her voice. She hesitated, then said the 4 words that made my stomach turn. "We need to talk." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "Now you want to talk?" She fumbled for words, trying to sound soft, motherly. But it didn't fit her anymore. Turns out, the family. Business was falling apart. The pandemic had hit hard, and guess who they had trusted to manage everything? Emily. And guess who had driven it straight into the ground? Also, Emily. They needed help. Financial help. Strategic help. Any kind of help? And suddenly the forgotten son, the one they kicked out, didn't seem so forgettable anymore. "Please," she said. "Your father and I, we could lose everything." I stayed quiet for a long moment, then said, "So you want me to clean up Emily's mess after she destroyed my life?" She tried to spin it differently, said it was about family and forgiveness and how we all make mistakes. But I'd made peace with the truth long ago. I owed them nothing. I said no, calmly, clearly. She got angry, said I was being cold, said I was turning my back on my own parents. But I'd already spent too many years turning my back on myself, trying to earn their love. I wasn't about to start again. That phone call ended with me saying words I never thought. I'd have the strength to say, "You didn't raise me. Margaret did. Go ask your golden child for help." And then I hung up. But it didn't stop there. 2 weeks later, Emily showed up at my door. Same fake smile, same polished tone. Like we were old friends catching up. "Hey," she chirped. "We need to talk." This time I didn't let her in with open arms. I crossed my arms, stood in the doorway, and stared. "Why are you here?" She danced around it at first, talked about the past, said we should let it go. That family is all we've got. Then came the real reason. "The business is failing. Mom and Dad are desperate. I thought maybe you could help." And there it was. The truth. Not remorse, not reconciliation, just a plea for rescue. I told her no, not angrily, not even with bitterness, just no. Her smile faded. Her eyes narrowed. She said I was being selfish, that I was overreacting. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "You burned that bridge, Emily, and now you're drowning on the other side." She stormed off, slamming the door behind her. But it didn't rattle me. For once, I stood in that silence and felt powerful. They came back again, my parents, both of them. This time, my father looked smaller, weaker, maybe more human. He admitted they were wrong, said they believed the wrong person, said they were desperate now and didn't know where else to turn. And maybe for a split second, I felt sorry for him, but sympathy doesn't rebuild trust, and I told them that. "You chose her," I said, "and now you have to live with that choice." My mother started to cry. My father just nodded. And together, they left. And when the door shut, this time I didn't feel pain, I felt peace. They haven't come back since. No more calls, no more knocks, just silence. The same kind they once used to punish me, now working quietly against them. And you know what? I'm okay with it, because sometimes silence isn't empty. Sometimes it's peace. It's been a few years since that last door closed. I've built a life, a good one. I have a job I'm proud of, a home that feels like mine, friends who call just to check in. And Aunt Margaret, she's still there, still my anchor. Every holiday, every birthday, every milestone, she shows up. With warmth, with wisdom, and sometimes with those lemon cookies I used to steal from her kitchen. She never asked for anything in return. Just love, just presence, just the chance to remind me that real family isn't about shared blood. It's about shared heart. You see, I spent so much of my life trying to be seen by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. I bent over backwards for scraps of approval. I let myself believe I wasn't enough, but I was never the problem, and neither are you. If you've ever been cast aside, if you've ever felt invisible in your own home, if you've spent your life wondering what you did wrong, let me tell you something from one forgotten child to another. You deserved more. You still do. And you don't have to earn love that's real. It took me years to stop chasing ghosts, to stop waiting for apologies that never came, to let go of the hope that one day they'd see me. But in that letting go, I found myself. I found peace. I found pride, and I found love. Not in the place I expected, but in the one I needed all along. Aunt Margaret didn't give birth to me, but she raised me in the moments that counted. She gave me back to myself when the world had taken me apart. So, no, I didn't save my parents. I didn't fix what Emily broke, and I didn't go back. Because sometimes walking away isn't bitterness. It's survival. It's healing. It's finally choosing yourself, and maybe that's what family really is in the end, not who you come from, but who walks beside you when the rest of the world walks away. Thank you watching. If this story touched you in any way, if it made you feel seen, understood, or just a little less alone, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button, share your story in the comments, and let's keep building a space where every voice matters, even the ones the world tried to silence, because here, you're not invisible. You're home.